The kick came without warning. Daisy's small body hit the cracked pavement hard, her worn sneakers skidding across broken glass and oil stains. Pain exploded through her ribs as dirty water soaked through her too-thin jacket. "Grab the mutt," a voice barked above her. "No," Daisy screamed, reaching out with scraped hands. "Please, no. Buster." The puppy's terrified yelps echoed off the abandoned buildings as rough hands grabbed his golden fur. His little paws scrambled in the air, trying to reach her. "Bait dogs go for $50. The second man laughed, holding the struggling puppy by the scruff. "This one's perfect, small enough they won't kill him too quick." Daisy tried to stand, but a boot pressed down on her shoulder, grinding her back into the filth. "Stay down, street rat, unless you want what he's gonna get." The green van's door slammed shut on Buster's desperate whimpers. Tires squealed as it pulled away, leaving Daisy sobbing in a puddle that smelled like gasoline and despair. She had nothing. She was nothing. Everyone always said so. But as she pushed herself up on trembling arms, her eyes fell on something in the distance. A motorcycle at the far gas pump. And standing beside it, filling his tank, was the biggest, scariest-looking man she'd ever seen. Daisy wiped the blood from her split lip and started running. 10:15 a.m., behind Murphy's grocery. 3 weeks earlier, Daisy had found Buster shivering in a dumpster behind Murphy's grocery, his golden fur matted with garbage and his ribs showing through his skin. Someone had dumped him there like trash, probably because he was the run of the litter. She understood what that felt like. "It's okay," she'd whispered, wrapping him in her only blanket, a stained fleece she pulled from a donation bin. "I've got you now. We've got each other." That was the day her life had gained meaning. Before Buster, the days bled together in a gray haze of hunger and cold. She'd been in foster care once, years ago, but after the fourth family sent her back, too difficult, too damaged, too much, she'd slipped through the cracks. At 10 years old, Daisy had learned that the world had no room for children nobody wanted. But Buster wanted her. Every morning, he'd wake her with his wet nose pressed against her cheek, his tail wagging with pure joy that she existed. He didn't care that her clothes were dirty or that she smelled like the streets. He didn't care that she had no home, no family, no future. To Buster, she was everything. They became a team. Daisy would panhandle near the nicer restaurants, and she'd split whatever food she got with him. Half for her, half for Buster, always. She taught him to sit and shake paw using bits of hot dog bun. He learned to sleep curled against her chest, keeping her warm through the cold October nights. "Good boy," she'd whisper into his soft fur. "Such a good boy. We're gonna be okay, Buster. We just need to stick together." 10:12 a.m., the alley. Daisy had been singing to Buster when they came. She'd found a relatively clean spot behind an abandoned laundromat, sheltered from the wind by an overturned shopping cart. Buster was gnawing happily on a discarded beef rib she'd rescued from a restaurant's trash, his little tail creating a rhythm against the concrete. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine," Daisy sang softly, scratching behind his ears the way he loved. "You make me happy when skies are gray." The green van pulled up slowly, its engine rumbling. Daisy looked up, instinctively pulling Buster closer. Street kids learned early that vehicles that approached slowly meant trouble. 2 men got out. The first was thin and wiry, with a face like a rat and a cigarette dangling from his lips. The second was broader, with prison tattoos crawling up his neck and dead eyes that swept over Daisy like she was something stuck to his shoe. Well, the thin one," Lenny said, grinning to show yellow teeth. "What do we have here?" Daisy stood, putting herself between them and Buster. "We're not bothering anyone. That's a nice-looking puppy. The bigger one," Mick said, moving closer. "Golden Retriever mix?" "He's mine." Daisy's voice shook, but she lifted her chin. "You can't have him." Lenny laughed, a sound like rusty nails scraping metal. "Ain't that precious, Mick?" She thinks she has a choice. "Please." Daisy hated how small her voice sounded. "He's all I have. Please don't." That's when Lenny moved. His hand shot out, grabbing for Buster. Daisy tried to hold on, but she was a 60-pound girl against a grown man. Buster yelped in terror as Lenny's fingers closed around his collar. "No!" Daisy screamed, launching herself at Lenny. She managed to scratch his face, deep enough to draw blood. That's when Mick kicked her. The steel-toed boot caught her in the ribs with enough force to lift her off her feet. Daisy hit the pavement hard, the air exploding from her lungs in a painful gasp. Black spots danced across her vision. "Little bitch," Mick snarled, raising his boot again. Forget her, Lenny snapped, holding the struggling puppy. Grab the mutt and let's go. Marcus is waiting, and he pays by the pound for bait dogs. Through the haze of pain, Daisy heard Buster's terrified cries getting farther away. She tried to stand, tried to follow, but her legs wouldn't work. Her whole body was screaming. The van doors slammed. The engine roared. And then they were gone. Daisy lay there in the dirty alley, tears mixing with the blood from her split lip, listening to the echo of Buster's whimpers fade into nothing. She'd failed him, the one thing in this world that loved her, and she'd let them take him. For a long moment, she just wanted to stay there on the cold concrete and disappear. Nobody would miss her. Nobody would even notice. But then she heard it, a deep, rumbling sound in the distance. A motorcycle engine. Daisy's head lifted. The gas station. She could see it from here, just 2 blocks away. And there was a motorcycle there, being fueled by a mountain of a man in black leather. Her grandmother, before she died, used to say that angels came in all shapes. Maybe sometimes they wore motorcycle boots. Daisy pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the stabbing pain in her ribs, and started running. 10:18 a.m., Mike's gas station. Titus Grizz King was having what civilians might call a bad day, but what he considered a moderately annoying Tuesday. His morning had started with his favorite coffee mug shattering in the clubhouse sink. Then his bike, his baby, a custom 2018 Harley-Davidson Fat Boy he'd spent 2 years and $15,000 perfecting, had developed a mysterious rattle that no amount of mechanical expertise could identify. And now, to top it all off, this gas station's pump was running at the speed of Continental Drift. At 6'7" and 280 pounds of muscle, scar tissue, and bad attitude, Grizz was not a patient man. He'd been president of the Iron Mastiffs Motorcycle Club for 12 years. In that time, he'd broken up bar fights, negotiated territory disputes with rival clubs, and once stared down 3 armed robbers who'd had the profound misfortune of targeting a liquor store while the Mastiffs were inside buying beer. But a slow gas pump? That was testing even his legendary composure. Come on, he muttered, watching the dollar amount tick up with agonizing slowness. I've seen glaciers move faster. He was considering just abandoning the pump and riding on fumes when he felt the tug on his chain wallet. Grizz's hand went to his belt knife before his brain processed what was happening. Years of living in a world where hesitation got you killed had trained certain reflexes into his body. He spun, ready for a threat, and froze. The girl couldn't have been more than 10 years old. She was drowning in a raincoat 3 sizes too big, streaked with mud and what looked like motor oil. Her face was pale beneath the dirt, and a fresh cut on her lip was still bleeding. But it was her eyes that stopped Grizz cold. Huge, dark, and filled with the kind of desperation he'd only seen in war zones. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. Get lost, kid, Grizz growled, turning back to the pump. He didn't do well with children. They were fragile and complicated, and he had no idea how to talk to them without sounding like he was interrogating a suspect. Mister, please. Her voice cracked on the words, thick with tears. You look scary. I need scary. Despite himself, Grizz glanced back. The girl had collapsed onto her knees on the oily pavement, her small hands clasped together like she was praying. 2 men in a van, she sobbed. They kicked me. They took Buster. Please, you have to help me find him. You're big and scary, and they were big and scary, and I can't. I can't do it alone. Who's Buster? Grizz asked, against his better judgment. Your brother? My puppy. The word came out as a wail that hit Grizz square in the chest. He's all I have. He's just a baby, and they took him to use for bait. For fighting dogs. They're going to let their dogs tear him apart. And he's so little, and he's probably so scared. And she couldn't continue. She just collapsed forward, her whole body racked with sobs that seemed too big for her small frame. Grizz stood very still. He had 3 dogs at home, all pit bulls he'd rescued from fighting rings. Tank had been found chained to a tree, starving. Duchess had cigarette burns all over her face. And Bear, the youngest, had been pulled from a ring in Detroit with half his ear missing and more scars than fur. The thought of someone doing that to a puppy, to someone's beloved pet, to this crying child's only friend. Something dark and familiar woke up in Grizz's chest. It was the same feeling he'd had when he'd found out his baby sister's boyfriend had put hands on her. The same feeling he'd had when he'd walked in on 3 grown men beating a homeless veteran behind a bar. It was the feeling that came right before Grizz stopped being civilized. What kind of van? His voice had dropped to a low rumble that made the girl's head snap up. Green, she whispered. Old. One of the back doors was dented. And I think it said Murphy's Plumbing on the side, but the paint was all faded. How long ago? Maybe 10 minutes? They drove that way. She pointed west with a trembling hand. Grizz looked at his watch, 10:19 a.m. Then he looked at the girl, really looked at her. The raincoat couldn't hide how thin she was. Her sneakers had holes in them. And unless he missed his guess, she'd been living on the streets for a while. Nobody was coming to help her. She had no one. Except now, she had him. Grizz pulled the gas nozzle out and slammed it back into the pump, not bothering to wait for his change. He swung his leg over his bike and fired up the engine, the V-twin roaring to life with a sound like controlled thunder. Get on, he said, patting the seat behind him. The girl stared at him with wide eyes. Really, we're burning daylight. Your puppy's got a 10-minute head start, and I've got a club full of bikers who hate people who hurt animals almost as much as I do. He glanced back at her. You got a name? Daisy. All right, Daisy. I'm Grizz. Now get on the bike, hold on to my vest, and hold on tight. We're about to make some very bad men have a very bad day. Daisy scrambled onto the bike behind him, her small arms wrapping around his waist. She was lighter than his leather jacket. Thank you, she whispered into his back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Grizz didn't answer. He just revved the engine, kicked the bike into gear, and roared out of the gas station with the kind of speed that would have gotten a civilian pulled over. But Grizz wasn't worried about cops right now. He was worried about keeping his promise to get to those men before he lost his temper completely. Though honestly, that ship had probably already sailed. 10:27 a.m., Iron Mastiff's clubhouse. The Iron Mastiff's clubhouse sat on the eastern edge of town, in an area that real estate agents politely called developing, and everyone else called the part you don't drive through after dark. It was a converted warehouse with reinforced doors, security cameras, and enough motorcycles parked out front to start a parade. Or a war. Grizz's bike roared into the parking lot, scattering gravel. He could see several of his brothers drinking coffee on the front porch, a morning ritual that usually involved hangovers, terrible jokes, and arguing about which brand of motor oil was superior. Not today. Grizz killed the engine and dismounted in one smooth motion. Daisy stayed on the bike, looking small and scared among all the leather and chrome. Prospect, Grizz's voice could have stripped paint. Get the girl some water and a first aid kit. Now, a young man with Prospect stitched on his vest scrambled to obey. The other bikers on the porch had gone quiet, watching their president with the kind of attention that meant something serious was about to happen. Tommy Wrench Morrison, the club's sergeant-at-arms and Grizz's best friend for 20 years, set down his coffee mug and stood. He was shorter than Grizz, but built like a tank, with arms that looked like they could bend steel. Grizz? What's going on? Head snatchers, Grizz said, his voice flat and cold. Green van, Murphy's Plumbing logo, probably fake. 2 men, west side, maybe heading toward the industrial district. They grabbed this girl's puppy to use as a bait dog. The reaction was immediate. The bikers on the porch went rigid. Coffee mugs hit the ground. One man, Diesel, who ran the club's garage, actually cracked his knuckles with an audible pop. The Iron Mastiffs had one absolute, unbreakable rule that every member knew. You don't hurt women, kids, or animals. Period. The club had been founded by Grizz's father, a Vietnam vet who'd seen enough cruelty in his life to have no tolerance for it in his club. That philosophy had been passed down like scripture. How long ago? Wrench asked, already moving toward his bike. 15 minutes, give or take. They've got a head start, but they don't know we're coming. Grizz looked around at the assembled bikers, some curious, some already angry, already. This is voluntary. Anyone who doesn't want can sit it out. But I'm going to find these men, and I'm going to make sure they understand what happens when you hurt something innocent. Nobody sat down. Good, Grizz said. Wrench, call everyone. I want every Mastiff in a 50-mile radius on the street in the next 10 minutes. Split into teams and grid search the West Industrial area. These morons are probably holed up in a warehouse somewhere. What about the cops? Someone asked. We'll call them, Grizz said, after we're done talking to our new friends. Wrench grinned, an expression that had made grown men reconsider their life choices. On it, Prez. Hey, Smokey. A lean man with gray streaking his beard looked up. Smokey had been a cop before he retired and joined the club. He still had contacts in the department, and he knew how to walk the line between legal and, let's call it, creative justice. Yeah, Wrench. Get your CI network active. We're looking for dogfighting rings, animal abuse calls, anything in the past 6 months in the industrial district. These guys aren't first-timers. Copy that. Grizz turned back to the clubhouse, where Daisy was being tended to by the prospect, a kid named Kyle who was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the cut on her lip. Daisy, Grizz said, kneeling down so he was at her eye level. Even kneeling, he was still taller than her. I need you to tell me everything you remember about these men. What they looked like, what they said, anything. Daisy nodded, her hands wrapped around a bottle of water. The thin one had a tattoo on his neck, like a spider or something. And the big one, he had scars on his face. They said someone named Marcus was waiting, that he pays by the pound. Wrench and Smokey exchanged looks. Marcus Vega, Smokey said quietly, runs an underground fighting ring out of an abandoned textile factory on Riverside Avenue. I've been trying to get the cops to raid that place for 2 years, but he pays off enough people to stay ahead of warrants. Not anymore, Grizz said, standing. Wrench, you're with me. Diesel, take 5 bikes and sweep the warehouse district south of Riverside. Smokey, you and the prospects cover the north approach. We communicate by phone. No radios, nothing the cops can scan. When someone spots the van, you report but do not engage until I arrive. Understood. Understood, Prez. One more thing. Grizz's voice dropped to a tone that made everyone pay attention. These men kicked a child and stole her puppy. They are not good people, but we are not murderers. We hurt them enough that they never forget why it's a bad idea to prey on the helpless, but we don't cross the line that puts us in prison. Clear. Clear, the assembled bikers chorused. Then roll out. The next 5 minutes were organized chaos as the Iron Mastiffs mobilized. Bikes roared to life. Men checked knives, brass knuckles, and other implements that weren't technically illegal but definitely weren't friendly. The prospect brought Daisy a jacket, one of the smaller ones from the club's supply, and helped her put it on. Grizz walked over to where she sat on a bench, looking tiny and lost among all the controlled violence being prepared around her. Daisy, I need you to stay here where it's safe, he said. No. She jumped to her feet, her eyes suddenly fierce. I'm coming with you. Buster needs me. He's probably so scared, and if he hears my voice, it's dangerous. I don't care. Tears were streaming down her face again, but these were angry tears. You don't understand. Before I found Buster, I wanted to. I was so lonely I wanted to die. And then he came, and he needed me, and I had a reason to wake up every day. I have to be there when you find him. I have to. Grizz looked at this tiny, fierce girl and saw something he recognized. It was the same thing he saw in the mirror when he decided to leave his abusive father's house at 16. The same thing he'd seen in his sister when she'd finally pressed charges against her ex. It was the refusal to be a victim. All right, he said quietly, but you stay on my bike, and you do exactly what I say. When I tell you to duck, you duck. When I tell you to stay put, you don't move. Understood? Yes, sir. And stop calling me sir. It's Grizz. For the first time since he'd met her, Daisy smiled. It was small and shaky, but it was there. Okay, Grizz. He held out his hand. She took it, and together, they walked toward his motorcycle while behind them, 32 Iron Mastiffs prepared to unleash righteous fury on anyone stupid enough to hurt a little girl's puppy. 10:42 a.m., Industrial District. The Industrial District was a graveyard of American manufacturing. Closed factories stood like tombstones, their windows shattered, their walls covered in graffiti. Rusted chain-link fences guarded nothing but emptiness. It was the perfect place for people who wanted to do terrible things away from prying eyes, which made it the perfect hunting ground. Grizz's bike rumbled down Riverside Avenue, Daisy holding tight to his vest. Behind them, 4 other bikes fanned out, Wrench and 3 others whose names struck fear into anyone who crossed the Iron Mastiffs. They were looking for a green van, and more importantly, they were looking for justice. Grizz's phone buzzed against his chest. He pulled over and checked it. Text from Diesel, found fresh tire tracks behind old Patterson Steel. Checking it out. Another text, this one from Smokey, talked to homeless camp near the river. They said they heard dogs barking from the old auto body shop on Maple. Lots of barking. Grizz showed the text to Wrench, who'd pulled up beside him. That's 3 blocks from Marcus Vega's known location, Wrench said. Want to bet our friends are doing business there? No bet, Grizz replied. He typed back to Smokey. Circle the location, but stay out of sight. We're coming to you. They converged on the auto body shop from 3 directions, like wolves surrounding prey. The building was a 2-story structure that had once serviced semi-trucks. Now its garage doors were rusted shut, and gang tags covered every available surface. But in the back parking lot, partially hidden behind a dumpster, was a green van with Murphy's Plumbing faded on its side. Grizz killed his engine a block away. The other bikes followed suit. "That's it," Daisy whispered urgently. "That's the van. They're here. Stay with Kyle," Grizz told her, gesturing to the prospect who'd pulled up with Smokey's group. "Do not follow us inside." "But, Daisy," Grizz's tone left no room for argument. "I promise you, we will get Buster back. But I need you safe. Can you trust me?" She looked up at him with those huge, frightened eyes. Then she nodded. "Good girl." Grizz turned to his assembled brothers. 15 bikers, all watching him, all waiting for orders. "Wrench, take 3 men and cover the back entrance. Diesel, you and yours watch the side windows in case anyone tries to run. Smokey, you're with me on the front approach. Everyone else, create a perimeter. Nobody goes in or out except us. And remember, we're not murderers," Wrench finished. "Just educators." Exactly. As his men moved into position with practiced efficiency, Grizz allowed himself a moment to just listen. From inside the building, he could hear what Daisy had described: dogs barking. Lots of them. Not the happy barking of dogs playing, but the desperate, terrified sounds of animals in distress. And beneath that, if he listened very carefully, he could hear men laughing. The dark thing in Grizz's chest woke up fully. His phone buzzed one more time. Text from Wrench. "In position. Back door is unlocked. Sloppy." Grizz texted back to all his team leaders. "On my count. 3, 2, 1. Go." 10:47 a.m. Inside the auto body shop. Lenny was having a good day. He and Mick had scored 8 dogs in the past week. 4 of them actual fighting stock they could sell to Marcus for real money, and 4 smaller ones like the golden retriever puppy they'd grabbed that morning. Bait dogs weren't worth as much, but they were necessary for training the fighters. Plus, it was fun watching the little ones try to defend themselves. Lenny took a drag of his cigarette and looked around the main floor of the old auto body shop. They'd set it up nice. Cages along one wall, a fighting pit in the center, constructed from plywood and chain link, and enough space for spectators when Marcus hosted his events. The puppy was in a cage near the back, whimpering pathetically. "Listen to him cry," Lenny laughed, walking over to bang on the cage bars. "What's wrong, little guy? Missing your street rat?" Should have seen her face when Mick kicked her. Mick was across the room, feeding their current champion, a scarred pit bull named Crusher, raw meat. The dog was a monster, nearly 90 pounds of muscle and aggression. He'd won 17 fights in a row. "Marcus is coming at noon," Mick called over. "He wants to see Crusher work before the big fight Saturday. We using the Golden for warm-up? Might as well. Break him in easy." Lenny grinned, reaching into the cage. The puppy tried to shrink away, pressing himself against the back of the cage. But there was nowhere to go. Lenny grabbed him by the scruff and pulled him out, ignoring the pitiful yelps. "Please don't hurt me," Lenny said in a mocking baby voice. "Please, mister, I'm just a puppy. I'm somebody's friend. Too bad, kid. Should have been born a fighter instead of a victim." He was carrying the puppy toward the pit when Mick held up a hand. "You hear that?" Lenny stopped. "Hear what?" "I don't know. Like engines." They both listened. At first, there was nothing. Then Lenny heard it too. A low rumble, getting louder. Multiple engines. Big ones. Probably just traffic on the main road, Lenny said, though he felt a prickle of unease run down his spine. The rumble got louder. And louder. And then it surrounded them. The windows rattled in their frames. The cage bars vibrated. Crusher, their vicious fighting dog, whined and pressed himself against the floor. What the hell? Mick moved toward the front door. That's when all the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, Lenny could hear his own heart pounding. The puppy in his arms had gone silent, as if sensing that something much more dangerous than Lenny had just arrived. The rumble of engines stopped. For 3 seconds, there was perfect silence. Then a voice outside, deep, cold, and absolutely terrifying, called out, "You have 10 seconds to put the dogs down and come out with your hands visible." 10, 9, 8. "Who the hell is that?" Lenny whispered. Mick had gone pale. "I don't know, but there's got to be 20 bikes out there. We need to." Boom. The front door exploded inward, the lock shattering under a single kick that sent the metal door flying off its hinges. Daylight flooded in, silhouetting a figure that Lenny's brain refused to process as human. The man was enormous, not just tall, but massive, like someone had carved a Viking berserker from granite and given it motorcycle boots. His eyes, visible even in the dim light, were cold and flat and promised absolutely nothing good. Behind him, more figures poured through the door. Big men, angry men, men wearing matching vests with a snarling Mastiff logo. Oh God, Mick breathed. Oh God, we're dead. Grizz stepped into the room, his boots crunching on broken glass. He looked around slowly, at the cages, at the fighting pit, at the terrified dogs, at the puppy trembling in Lenny's arms. I'm going to give you two choices, Grizz said, his voice conversational but carrying clearly through the space. Choice 1. You put the animals down very gently. You get on your knees, and you wait for the police. Choice 2. You make me come over there and take him from you. Lenny's brain was screaming at him to comply, to put down the puppy, to beg for mercy. But panic and stupidity are close cousins. You don't know who you're messing with. Lenny shouted, trying to sound tough. We work for Marcus Vega. He's connected. Hell, I don't care if you work for the president, Grizz interrupted. You took something from a little girl. You kicked her, and you were about to feed her puppy to a fighting dog for entertainment. He took a step forward. So let me be very clear. Marcus Vega doesn't scare me. The police don't scare me. And you two definitely don't scare me. Now put the puppy down. Mick made a mistake. He grabbed a wrench from the workbench and swung it at Wrench, who'd moved up beside Grizz. Wrench caught Mick's wrist mid-swing, twisted, and the wrench went clattering to the floor. A second later, Mick followed it, crying out as Wrench put him in an arm lock that looked professionally painful. Anyone else want to play hero? Wrench asked mildly. Lenny looked at the puppy in his arms, then at Grizz, then at the 15 other bikers now filling the room. Slowly, he set the puppy on the ground. Smart choice, Grizz said. Now get on your knees. 10:51 a.m., outside the auto body shop. Daisy heard the door break. She was standing with Kyle the prospect, 50 yards from the building, and she heard the crash of metal and what is clearly as if she'd been standing right there. Stay here, Kyle told her, but his attention was on the building, his whole body tense. Inside, she could hear shouting, men's voices, scared and angry. And beneath it all, the barking of dogs, lots of dogs. Buster, she whispered, taking a step toward the building. Kyle's hand landed gently on her shoulder. Grizz said to wait. He'll get him. But what if? A whistle cut through the air, sharp, clear, unmistakable. It was a signal. From around the corner of the building, Wrench appeared, carrying something. No, not something. Someone. Mick stumbled along in front of him, one arm twisted behind his back, his face already bruising. Wrench marched him toward one of the bikes like a parent dragging a misbehaving toddler. Sit, Wrench ordered, shoving Mick down onto the curb. Move, and I'll show you what we do to people who hurt kids. Mick sat very, very still. Then Grizz emerged from the building, and in his arms, cradled like something precious, was Buster. Buster. Daisy broke away from Kyle and ran. She crossed the parking lot in seconds, her sneakers slapping against cracked asphalt. Grizz saw her coming and knelt down, setting the puppy gently on the ground. Buster saw Daisy and his whole body started wiggling. His tail wagged so hard his entire back end moved. He launched himself at her with all the grace of a golden retriever puppy, which is to say, none, and they collided in a tangle of girl and dog and pure, unbridled joy. Buster, Buster, oh Buster, Daisy sobbed, burying her face in his fur. I thought I'd lost you. I thought they'd hurt you. Are you okay? Let me see, let me. She frantically checked him over, running her hands along his legs, his belly, his soft ears. Buster endured the inspection patiently, too busy licking her face to care about anything else. He's okay, Grizz said quietly. Little shaken up, but they didn't have time to use him. We got here fast enough. Daisy looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. But these were different tears. These were the kind that came from relief so intense it had nowhere else to go. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. Grizz reached out and gently patted Buster's head with his huge, scarred hand. The puppy immediately tried to lick his fingers, tail still going like a propeller. Good boy, Grizz murmured. Brave boy. You did good, staying quiet in there. Behind them, more bikers were emerging from the building. Some were carrying cages with dogs inside. Pit bulls, mostly, but also a beagle and what looked like a German shepherd mix. The animals looked underfed and scared, but alive. Smokey was on his phone, and Daisy heard him say, Yeah, we need animal control and police backup at the old Patterson Auto Body Shop on Maple. Multiple animals in distress, suspected dogfighting operation. No, we're citizens making a report. Yeah, we'll wait. Wrench walked over to where Grizz was kneeling with Daisy. Lenny's inside, zip-tied and crying, he reported. We found the fight ring, equipment for training attack dogs, the whole setup. Smokey's got photos before the cops arrive. This should be enough to shut Marcus Vega down for good. Good. Grizz stood, looking back at the building. And our two friends? Scared speechless. Mick himself. Despite everything, Daisy giggled, a slightly hysterical sound, but genuine. Wrench grinned down at her. That's the spirit, kid. Bad guys should be scared of us. That's how you know justice is working. The sound of sirens echoed in the distance, getting closer. All right, Grizz said, raising his voice so all his brothers could hear. Police are 2 minutes out. We stay cooperative, we give statements, and we let the law take it from here. Smokey, your lead on talking to the cops, you know the language. Everyone else, park your bikes neat, and put on your best concerned citizen faces. There was a murmur of acknowledgement as the bikers began organizing themselves. Despite the leather and tattoos and general air of danger, they moved with the precision of people who knew how to work as a team. Grizz turned back to Daisy. When the cops get here, you tell them exactly what happened. Don't leave anything out. You got that? She nodded, still holding Buster close. And Daisy, you were brave today. Really brave. Not many kids could have done what you did. Asking for help, giving us the information we needed, trusting strangers. That took guts. I just wanted Buster back, she said quietly. I know, but you didn't give up. That matters. The police cars pulled into the parking lot, lights flashing. For units, which meant this was being taken seriously. A female officer got out of the first car, her hand resting cautiously on her service weapon as she took in the scene. 15 bikers, multiple dogs, 2 men in custody, and 1 little girl holding a puppy. Afternoon, Officer Ramirez, Smokey called out, friendly but professional. We've got a situation here you're going to want to see. 11:15 a.m., inside the auto body shop. Officer Ramirez had been a cop for 12 years. She'd seen domestic violence, drug busts, and once a naked man trying to fight a statue in the park. But she'd never quite seen anything like this. The interior of the auto body shop looked like a crime scene from a horror movie about animal abuse. Cages lined one wall, some still containing terrified dogs. The center of the room held what was unmistakably a fighting pit. Bloodstained plywood surrounded by chain-link fencing. Training equipment hung from hooks. Weighted vests for the dogs, bite sleeves, and worse. And in the middle of it all, zip-tied to a support beam, were 2 men who looked like they'd aged 10 years in the past 30 minutes. Ramirez's partner, Officer Chun, was photographing everything with meticulous care while Animal Control's van pulled up outside. Through the broken front door, Ramirez could see the bikers standing in a neat line, answering questions from the other officers. She turned to Smokey, who'd identified himself as the spokesperson. Let me get this straight, she said. You just happened to be in the area, you heard dogs in distress, and you decided to investigate? That's about the size of it. Officer, Smokey said with a slight smile. We're animal lovers. The Iron Mastiffs have a strict policy against abuse. Uh-huh. Ramirez looked at the 2 suspects. And they just cooperated when you suggested they wait for police. After some gentle persuasion, yes ma'am. Ramirez looked at Lenny and Mick. Both men were bruised, but nothing that suggested excessive force. More like they'd been in a scuffle and lost badly. The zip ties binding them were the kind you could buy at any hardware store. Not police issue, but not illegal for citizens to carry. Officer, Lenny spoke up, his voice shaking. These men broke in here. They assaulted us. This is... Shut up, Lenny, Ramirez said tiredly. She walked over to the cage area and looked at the animals. A pit bull with scars across his face. A beagle missing an eye. And in a cage near the back, training equipment that made her jaw clench. She'd been trying to bust Marcus Vega's operation for 2 years. Every time they got close, evidence disappeared or witnesses recanted. Vega had money and connections, and he knew how to use both. But this was everything. Dogs, equipment, the facility itself. This was enough to bring charges that would stick. Chun, she called to her partner. Call it in. Tell them we need the detective unit down here. This is bigger than a patrol response. As Chun made the call, Ramirez walked back outside. The little girl, Daisy, according to the initial report, was sitting on the curb with her puppy, giving a statement to another officer. The kid looked like she'd been through hell. Dirty clothes, bruised ribs, split lip. But she was smiling as the puppy licked her face. The big biker, the one who'd introduced himself as Grizz, was standing nearby, watching over the girl like a protective bear. Ramirez walked over to him. Mr. King, she said formally, that's quite an operation you ran here. We just wanted to help a kid find her dog. Officer, Grizz replied, his voice respectful but firm. Everything we did was in defense of animals in immediate danger. Ramirez studied him. She'd dealt with the iron mastiffs before. They were rough around the edges, sure, but they'd never crossed the line into serious crime. They ran a legitimate motorcycle shop, they paid their taxes, and they actually had a reputation for helping the community, feeding homeless camps, fixing up houses for veterans, that sort of thing. They were the kind of outlaws who made her job complicated. The girl says those men kicked her and stole her dog, Ramirez said. That's what she told us, too. And you believed her enough to mobilize your entire club? Grizz looked down at where Daisy was cuddling Buster, his expression softening in a way that made him look almost grandfatherly. Look at her, officer. She's a kid living on the streets with nothing but a puppy for company. Someone took that away from her. Yeah, I believed her. And even if I hadn't, I would have come anyway. You don't ignore a crying child. Ramirez found herself nodding. Fair enough. For the record, Mr. King, what you did here today was reckless and could have gone very wrong. Yes, ma'am. But it didn't. And thanks to your investigation, we've got enough evidence to shut down the biggest dogfighting ring in the city. She held out her hand. So, off the record, thank you. Grizz shook her hand, his grip carefully controlled, strong enough to show respect, gentle enough not to hurt. Just doing what's right, officer. I'll need statements from all your men. This is going to take a while. We've got nowhere to be. As Ramirez walked away to coordinate with the arriving detective unit, Wrench sidled up next to Grizz. Think we're in trouble? He asked quietly. Nah. Cops hate animal abusers as much as we do. We just save them months of investigation. They'll give us a lecture about vigilante justice and then send us home. And Daisy. Both men looked at the little girl, who was now showing Buster to one of the animal control officers, explaining very seriously that he was a very good boy and needed to be treated very gently. We'll figure something out, Grizz said. Can't just leave her on the streets. You thinking foster care? I'm thinking there's got to be a better option. Before Wrench could respond, Lenny's voice cut through the parking lot, high-pitched and desperate. I want to make a deal. I'll tell you everything about Marcus Vega. Just get me away from these psychos. Ramirez's head turned sharply. What did you say about Marcus Vega? And just like that, Lenny started talking. 12:30 p.m., Iron Mastiff's clubhouse. By the time the police were done taking statements, it was past noon and Daisy was exhausted. She'd told her story 3 times, to Officer Ramirez, to a detective, and to a social worker who'd shown up with a concerned expression and a clipboard. Through it all, Buster had stayed pressed against her side, his warm weight a constant reminder that he was safe. They both were. Grizz had driven her back to the clubhouse on his motorcycle, with Buster secured in a special carrier strapped to the back. The puppy had seemed to enjoy the ride, his tongue lolling out as the wind ruffled his golden fur. Now they were in the clubhouse's kitchen, a surprisingly clean space considering it was maintained by bikers. Someone had made Daisy a sandwich. Someone else had found a bowl for Buster's water. And the prospect, Kyle, had raided the local pet store for puppy food, toys, and a proper leash. Daisy ate her sandwich slowly, overwhelmed by the sheer normalcy of it. Food that she hadn't scrounged from a dumpster. A clean, warm place to sit. People who were being kind to her without expecting anything in return. It felt like a dream. How are you holding up, kid? Wrench asked, sitting down across from her at the big wooden table. Okay, Daisy said quietly. Thank you. For the food. And for saving Buster. And everything. No thanks needed. We're just glad you're both safe. Wrench reached over to scratch Buster behind the ears. The puppy's tail thumped against the floor. He's a good dog. The best dog, Daisy agreed fiercely. Grizz walked in from the main room, his phone in his hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. That was Officer Ramirez, he said. Lenny and Mick are both facing multiple felony charges. And they're singing like canaries about Marcus Vega. The detective thinks they'll have enough to arrest him by tonight. Good, Wrench said with satisfaction. There's more. Grizz pulled out a chair and sat down, which made him exactly at Daisy's eye level despite the furniture. They found 23 dogs total in that building. Animal control is taking them all to a rescue that specializes in rehabilitation. They'll be safe. Daisy felt something loosen in her chest. All those scared dogs she'd seen in cages, they would be okay now. They'd get food and medical care and maybe, eventually, someone to love them the way she loved Buster. Daisy, Grizz said gently. The social worker wants to talk to you about placement options. She seems nice. Her name is Mrs. Patterson, and she's waiting in the other room. Daisy's hands tightened on her sandwich. Placement meant foster care. She'd been in foster care before. Sometimes it was okay. Sometimes it was awful. But it was never home. Do I have to? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. You need somewhere safe to live? Grizz said. Somewhere with a bed and food and... Can't I stay here? The words burst out before she could stop them. I'll be good. I can clean and help with cooking, and I won't bother anyone, and Buster doesn't eat much, and... Daisy. Grizz's big hand landed gently on her shoulder, stopping her panicked rush of words. This is a motorcycle clubhouse. It's no place for a kid. Tears started down her cheeks. But you saved me. You saved Buster. You're the only people who've ever helped me without wanting something back. Please don't send me away. Wrench and Grizz exchanged a long look, the kind of wordless communication that came from years of friendship. Let me talk to Mrs. Patterson, Grizz said finally. I'm not making any promises, Daisy, but let me see what I can figure out. He stood and walked toward the door, leaving Daisy alone with Wrench and Buster. He'll work something out, Wrench said confidently. Grizz is good at that. Really, kid, when Grizz decides something needs to happen, it happens. Hell, he once convinced the city council to let us adopt a highway. We were not their first choice of volunteers. Despite everything, Daisy giggled. In the other room, Grizz found Mrs. Patterson reviewing her paperwork. She was in her 50s, with kind eyes and the weary expression of someone who'd seen too many kids fall through the cracks of the system. Mr. King, she said, looking up. I was just reviewing Daisy's file. She's been in the system before, but she ran away from her last placement 8 months ago. We've been looking for her. 8 months on the streets, Grizz said quietly. At 10 years old. Yes, it's tragic. But now that we've found her again, we can. She doesn't want to go back into foster care. Mrs. Patterson sighed. Mr. King, I understand you've formed an attachment to the child, but a motorcycle clubhouse is not a suitable placement for a minor. She needs stability, education, proper supervision. She needs to feel safe, Grizz interrupted. She needs to be somewhere she won't run away from again. And she needs to keep her dog. Most foster families can't accommodate pets. I can. Mrs. Patterson blinked. I'm sorry. Grizz took a deep breath. He hadn't planned this. 10 hours ago, he'd been fueling his bike and thinking about coffee. Now he was about to volunteer for the most terrifying thing he could imagine, being responsible for a child. But when he thought about Daisy's face when she'd begged not to be sent away, I want to apply to be her foster parent, Grizz said. Emergency placement, while you do the paperwork for something more permanent. Mr. King, you're a single man living in a... I own a house, Grizz said. 3 bedrooms, full kitchen, good neighborhood. I run a legitimate business. I have no criminal record. And that kid trusts me, which is more than she'll trust whoever you place her with. Mrs. Patterson studied him carefully. You understand that fostering is a serious commitment? Background checks, home visits, parenting classes. I'll do whatever it takes. And your club members? Will act like perfect gentlemen around the child, or they'll answer to me. Grizz crossed his arms. Look, Mrs. Patterson, I'm not saying I'm father of the year material, but I'm what she wants, and I'm willing to try. For a long moment, Mrs. Patterson said nothing. Then she pulled out a different form. Emergency foster placement requires a home visit, references, and a preliminary background check. I can have all of that done by tomorrow morning. If everything checks out, I can approve a temporary placement while we work on long-term options. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Mr. King. You have no idea what you're signing up for. Grizz thought about the way Daisy had looked at him when she'd said, You're the only people who've ever helped me. He thought about the way she'd cried when she'd found Buster safe. Yeah, he said, I think I do. 1:45 p.m., police station holding cells. Lenny sat on the metal bench in the holding cell, his head in his hands, and tried to figure out where everything had gone wrong. The plan had been simple: grab some bait dogs, make some quick cash for Marcus, and be done by lunch. Easy money. Nobody important got hurt, because who cared about strays and street kids? But then the bikers had come. Lenny's hands were still shaking. He couldn't stop seeing that moment when the door had exploded inward and the mountain of a man had filled the doorway. He'd never felt so small in his life. The detective, Rodriguez, his name was, sat down across from Lenny with a folder full of evidence. You want to walk me through this again? Rodriguez asked. From the beginning. And Lenny talked. He told them about Marcus Vega's operation, the fights held every Saturday in different locations, The betting pools that brought in thousands of dollars, the dogs stolen from yards and shelters, and anywhere else they could find them. He gave them names, dates, locations. Mick, in the cell next door, was doing the same thing. They were terrified, not of the police, of what would happen when Marcus found out they talked, but they were more terrified of what would happen if those bikers came back. Please, Lenny begged for the 10th time. You have to protect us. Those guys, they knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't just beat us up, they scared us. Made us feel what we made those dogs feel. Made us get on our knees and apologize to the puppy. Rodriguez's expression was carefully neutral. And did you? Apologize. I said I was sorry. Lenny insisted. I said it over and over. But he kept asking me if I'd be sorry if he wasn't there. And I couldn't answer. Because I knew I wouldn't be. No, Rodriguez agreed. You wouldn't be. You'd be at Marcus Vega's ring right now, watching that puppy get torn apart. Lenny flinched. Rodriguez leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen, Lenny. You're going to testify against Marcus Vega. You're going to give us every detail about his operation. And in exchange, we'll recommend a reduced sentence and protective custody. And the bikers? The bikers, Rodriguez said with a slight smile, are heroes. They rescued a child-stolen pet and helped us break up a major criminal operation. The DA's office is very grateful. That's not fair. They broke in. They performed a citizen's arrest on suspects committing a felony in progress. Everything they did was legal. Rodriguez stood. You're looking at minimum 5 years, Lenny. Maximum 15. I suggest you cooperate. He walked away, leaving Lenny alone with his thoughts and his regrets. In the cell next door, Mick was crying. 1 week later, Daisy woke up to sunlight streaming through actual curtains in an actual bedroom that was hers. The walls were still kind of bare. Grizz had said she could decorate however she wanted, but she was still getting used to the idea that she was allowed to have opinions about things like wall color. There was a bed with clean sheets, a dresser with clothes that fit her, a desk for the homework she'd be starting once they got her enrolled in school. And at the foot of the bed, snoring softly, was Buster. The puppy had grown in just a week, now that he was getting regular meals and proper care. His golden fur was fluffy and clean. He wore a tiny leather vest that Diesel had made for him, complete with a miniature Iron Mastiff's patch. Daisy climbed out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake him, and padded to the window. Outside, she could see Grizz's backyard, big, fenced, perfect for a dog. He'd already installed a doghouse, for when Buster wants his own space, Grizz had explained seriously. From downstairs, she smelled coffee and something cooking. Daisy pulled on her robe, something Grizz had bought her because houses get cold in the morning, and headed down to the kitchen. Grizz was at the stove, making pancakes. He looked completely out of place in his domestic setting. A 6'7" biker in a kitchen apron that said "Kiss the Cook," a gag gift from Wrench. But he was flipping pancakes with impressive precision. "Morning, kid," he said without turning around. "Sleep okay?" "Yeah." Daisy climbed onto one of the kitchen stools. "Thanks. Pancakes will be ready in 5. Your social worker's coming by at 10 for the home visit." Mrs. Patterson had been true to her word. The background check had come back clean, though Grizz had some impressive stories from his younger days that didn't show up on official records. The home visit had revealed a safe, clean environment. References from club members, the local police, and even the owner of the motorcycle shop had all vouched for Grizz's character. 2 days ago, the judge had approved the emergency placement. Daisy was officially a foster child in Grizz's care. "Are you nervous?" Daisy asked. "About the home visit?" "Nah. House is clean. You're happy. Buster hasn't destroyed anything important. We're good." Grizz slid a plate of pancakes in front of her. "How about you? Nervous about school?" Daisy had missed almost a year of 4th grade, but Mrs. Patterson had worked with the district, and they'd agreed to let her start fresh in the fall with tutoring over the summer to catch up. "A little," Daisy admitted. "What if the other kids are mean?" Grizz sat down across from her with his own plate. "Then you tell a teacher. And if that doesn't work, you tell me. Because here's the thing, Daisy. You're not alone anymore. You've got me. You've got the club. And you've got Buster." As if summoned by his name, the puppy came trotting into the kitchen, tail wagging. He went straight to Grizz and sat perfectly, looking up with adoring eyes. "See," Grizz said, sneaking Buster a piece of pancake. "Even the dogs got your back." There was a knock at the door, and Wrench's voice called out, "Yo, Grizz, you ready for church?" Church was what the club called their weekly meetings. It was Thursday morning, which meant the officers would be gathering to discuss club business. "In here," Grizz called back. Wrench walked in, followed by Diesel, Smokey, and 3 other club members. They all nodded to Daisy. "Morning, kid," Wrench said. "Morning, Buster." The puppy barked happily and wagged his tail so hard his whole body wiggled. "We've got good news," Smokey announced. Marcus Vega was arrested last night. They raided his main facility, found 37 dogs, and enough evidence to put him away for 20 years. Lenny and Mick, Grizz asked, took a plea deal. 5 years each, protective custody. They'll be out in 3 with good behavior. Wrench grinned. But word on the street is that even in protective custody, they're having a rough time. Turns out people who hurt kids and animals aren't popular in prison. "Good," Daisy said firmly. The bikers laughed. "That's our girl," Diesel said. "Hey, speaking of which, we took a club vote. Official business." He pulled out a small leather vest, identical to the one Buster wore, but sized for a child. On the back, where the Iron Mastiff's patch usually sat, was a special patch, a golden puppy inside a heart, with the words "protected by the pack." "You're not a member," Diesel explained, handing it to Daisy. "You're family. That's better. Anyone messes with you, they mess with all of us." Daisy held the vest like it was made of gold. Really, Grizz confirmed. "You're stuck with us now, kid. Hope you like motorcycles." Daisy put on the vest carefully. It fit perfectly. Buster barked his approval. "One more thing," Wrench said. "The rescue that took all those dogs. They've got an adoption event this weekend. We were thinking maybe you'd want to come. Help some of those dogs find homes, the way Buster found you." "Can we, Grizz?" Daisy asked, her eyes shining. "Sure. We'll make it a club event. Whole pack shows up, scares people into adopting." Grizz winked. Nothing says "please adopt this dog" like 15 bikers asking very politely. As the officers headed out to their meeting, Daisy sat at the kitchen table, wearing her new vest, eating pancakes, and listening to Grizz talk about what groceries they needed to buy that afternoon. It was such a normal moment, such a perfect moment. And for the first time in her life, Daisy believed that maybe, just maybe, good things could last. Buster put his head in her lap, and she scratched his ears. "We made it, buddy," she whispered. "We found our pack." Outside, the motorcycles of the Iron Mastiffs gleamed in the morning sun, ready to ride, ready to protect, ready to be exactly what they'd always been, the scariest guardian angels anyone could ask for. And somewhere across town, in a prison cell, Lenny was learning what it felt like to be prey instead of predator. Justice, it turned out, didn't always wear a badge. Sometimes it wore leather and rode on 2 wheels. And sometimes, it came in the form of a little girl brave enough to ask for help and a biker tough enough to answer. 6 months later, the Christmas party at the Iron Mastiff's clubhouse was in full swing. Someone had strung lights around the garage. Someone else had cooked enough food to feed an army. And in the corner, wearing a Santa hat that kept sliding over his eyes, was Buster, now 40 pounds of pure golden retriever joy. Daisy was helping set out cookies when Mrs. Patterson arrived for her quarterly check-in. The social worker had become a regular visitor, and not just for official business. The club had sort of adopted her too. "How's school?" Mrs. Patterson asked, accepting a cup of cocoa from Wrench. "Good. I got an A on my math test." Daisy beamed. "Grizz has been helping me with my homework." "And the nightmares?" "Only once this month. But when I wake up scared, Buster's always there. And Grizz lets me come downstairs, and we watch movies until I feel better." Mrs. Patterson made notes on her tablet. "And you're happy here?" Daisy looked around the clubhouse. At Grizz, teaching some of the younger members how to change oil. At Diesel and Wrench arguing about the best route for tomorrow's ride. At the Christmas tree covered in ornaments that she'd helped decorate. At Buster, who was currently being spoiled with treats by at least 5 different bikers. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I'm home." Mrs. Patterson smiled. "Good. Because I have some papers for Grizz to sign, if he's still interested in making this permanent. Permanent. Adoption papers. If he wants to adopt you officially, instead of just fostering." Daisy's heart stopped, then started again, beating twice as fast. Really, we'll need a judge to approve it. But given how well the placement has worked out, I don't foresee any problems." Mrs. Patterson looked at her seriously. "Is that something you'd want, Daisy? To be officially part of this family?" Daisy didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded, tears already starting down her cheeks. Across the room, Grizz looked up from the engine he'd been explaining. He saw Daisy crying, saw Mrs. Patterson, and immediately headed over with the kind of purposeful stride that made lesser men step aside. "What's wrong?" he demanded, going into protective mode. "Nothing's wrong," Mrs. Patterson said, pulling out the papers. I'm just here to ask if you want to make this permanent. Grizz took the adoption papers, read them carefully, then looked at Daisy. Well, kid, you want to be stuck with me forever? Yes. Daisy launched herself at him, hugging him as tight as she could. Yes, yes, yes. Grizz, who'd faced down armed criminals without flinching, had to blink back moisture from his eyes as he hugged her back. All right then, he said gruffly. Someone get me a pen. Wrench materialized with one instantly. Grizz signed the papers while the entire club watched. When he was done, someone started clapping. Then everyone was clapping. Buster started barking excitedly, sensing the celebration. To family, Diesel shouted, raising his beer. To family, the club echoed. And in that moment, surrounded by bikers and love and a puppy wearing a Santa hat, Daisy finally understood what home really meant. It wasn't a place. It was the people who showed up when you needed them. The ones who fought for you. The ones who stayed. It was a biker who'd believed a crying girl at a gas station. It was a club that mobilized in minutes to save a puppy. It was justice served not by laws or badges, but by people who gave a damn. She'd started with nothing but a puppy and hope, and she'd ended up with everything.